CPS victims hunting justice and stand with the fight for a fair and just.
The children in our country are being made to be the victim of a situation they are not involved, and then sent to a foster home where they again are reintroduced to trauma of being the odd ball. Our courts are contaminated with young, inexperienced caseworkers and polluted with bribes, high-priced bonuses for speedy adoption of terminated parents, and judges who don't practice law with the Constitution in their sights. This is a problem. George Washington never thought of children as pawn in the game of freedom and American values, and never had he wanted to sell them. They were from his maker, his creator. Our children are being run down for no other reason than the profits being made in some way. Somehow these government agencies make money hand over fist day in and day out. They have you go to classes that they are billing for, and there is no viable reason for you to attend. Yet when you hear an update, CPS tells you that you're further away from when you started. Reunification is your goal, not theirs. And after you go through 12+ months of grueling, painstaking classes and meetings, all while getting the slimmest amount of time to visit your child, and even worse, you are always supervised, never alone again with your child. It's awful. How do they feel, do you think?
Where's the outrage? Why is nobody standing up for these families being torn apart by CPS?
Please don't tell me you're going to put all your bets on this superhero. You grown-ups are supposed to be coming to his rescue. Stop ignoring this problem. There is nothing more I can say to any of you. Please fight CPS and help those who have lost so much they can help themselves. Psalm 127:3. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from Him. This suggests children are a precious gift from God to be valued and cared for.
In the United States, a child a minute is taken into DHS, CPS, and so on custody. The reality is their picks are already selected, you just don't know it. Being perfect no longer matters. It's what the adopting families are looking for.
Who is it stealing the children, you ask?
From caseworker to the White House, the buck stops at all levels, just not where it is supposed to be. The services your family needs, we the people have paid for to ensure your reunification. Title IV says, reunify at all costs. United, we stand means nothing to us when it comes to family values. Children are being ripped away from their families. Parents are reverting to addictive behaviors to cover the pain. The trauma caused by child removal is just being recognized, and the results are atrocious. Termination of parental rights is not healthy for anyone, just profitable for the people enforcing the lie.
It's time Washington listens to the cries of our children, the wails of their mothers, and the rage growing in the fathers. These are our children. Keep your damn hands off them. We are coming to act on the behalf of the children God gave us to protect, and you kidnapped.
All right, Friday night edition of CPS Victims, Hunting Justice. I am your host, the CPS Punisher, and this is our show. I'm sorry about the extended fluff. I was kind of trying to get a hold of all of our peoples here, finding out where the heck everybody is. So if any of you are out there that are watching that are normally on the show with us, if I didn't get a link to you or something, maybe that was my fault. Maybe it is. Let me know, and I'll get it to you guys. As usual, the chat right here. We got a pretty good night tonight here. Our guest from last night that we were unable to contact with is here tonight, and she's going to answer some questions. And some people are excited to ask her questions about that, about her job. But I'm going to let Herbert go ahead and do the introduction to her. So, Herbert, make sure you do a nice introduction for our guests.
Okay, our guest, her name is Gayle. Gayle is an occupational therapist. Gayle will explain the nature of her job. She will also explain her interaction from time to time with CPS workers and her involvement. And also she'll tell a little bit about her story as being a person that's been in the system when she was younger. So here's Gayle.
All right. Let's get Gayle out of here. All right.
Hi.
Gayle, there she is. Welcome, Gayle.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
So I guess I'll start out sharing. First of all, I'm an occupational therapist, and for those who may not know what OTs do, um, we work in a wide range of populations, from early intervention to children to adults to the elderly population. And our goal is to get people to their highest level of function, if I could sum it up holistically. So we deal with all aspects of a person, emotional, spiritual, physical disabilities. You'll see us working a lot with physical therapists and speech therapists in various environments. I've worked extensively with children, which is one of the reasons that Herb invited me onto this program, because I've had my share of when I've had to report as a therapist, overseeing working with children and seeing and I can tell you some horrific stuff that I've had to report. And you know, CPS got involved, the court system, etc. So and then I've shared a little bit about my own personal story, that as a child, um my sister and I, our mother was very abusive, and they took my sister away when she was 12, and that was because she attempted suicide at the time, because our mother was that abusive, and we kept reporting. We reported to the school. The school I went to knew, the school my sister went to knew, and nothing was being done at all. And then finally, my sister went extreme, and then in the court's craziness, they took my sister away and they put her with a family member, but they left me there, and I was only 4 at the time. And then I get taken away at 12 years old. And again, it's because of extremeness on our mother's part. So our personal experience isn't CPS coming in and taking us out. Our personal experience is things had to get extreme before we were actually taking it out of the household. And then I stayed with several different people after that. And fortunately, everyone was pretty good in that respect. So I was fortunate, because that's not always the case when children are put in foster care, or have legal guardians. Yes.
So
Mhm.
when you were younger and you
Mhm.
were seeking, did you know, first of all, did you know that your situation was bad that you were in? Were you aware of that, or were you kind of just, like, were you aware that you were in an abusive situation, I guess is what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, I was in such a bad situation that I attempted suicide.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
Fortunately, and I was only 9 when I tried that one.
Oh,
But fortunately, I didn't know which side of the wrist you were supposed to slit, and I slit the wrong side.
oh man. Well, it's a
Right.
good thing you did that. It's a good
Thank
thing
you.
you went the wrong way.
Yeah. But
Oh,
yeah, you know, my sister and I were in a really tough situation at home, and our mother had mental illness. When you look back at it, we see it from that
mhm.
standpoint, but as children you don't know that, you know.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's why I'd asked you
Mhm.
if you know, because so the way statistics work,
Mhm.
not the way that they work, I know you know how they work, but what
Mhm.
they say is that even though the statistic, because we don't get a lot of removal statistics, we're starting to get them now, and what's happening and the effects of what's happening to children that are in this full-fledged foster care system, opposed to if you were in the system 30 years ago. But
Mhm.
what they're finding is that these kids, some of them or most of them, even though they were abused at home, would have been better off staying in their home to avoid the trauma that they got from the removal and then the separation from their family, or what was left of their family and their brothers and sisters. And I know that this wasn't kind of what you were on here to be interviewed on, but I think
Mhm.
that you have the brain capacity and the smarts to know. Do you feel that same way? Do you feel like you would have been better off there with the trauma
Oh,
that you
not
felt?
not even for a second. I would have died. And I'm
Okay.
positive of that. What and I can even speak for some of the children that I have worked with. It depends on what type of abuse it is. If a child is constantly getting sexually abused, they need to get out that house. It
Right.
breaks their spirit, it breaks their ability to function, it breaks
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem and everything that goes with that. If that
Mm-hmm.
child is being beaten down constantly, um they need to get out. And emotional abuse, that's the one abuse that
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately is not denoted by doctors many times or nurses. The behavior shows in schools and with friends. And a lot of times people say, oh, that child was just crazy, or, that child doesn't have all, their screws there. But meanwhile, they're not looking at what's going on when you have a parent that is breaking them. And I mean genuinely breaking them. So a lot of times the unfortunate part, see, the key for me with CPS is that they should be, for the most part, a referral system of resources to help a parent.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that would be a child's taken out of the house because the parent is leaving them alone at a young age because the parent needs to work at night. The parent needs to survive. So I get that. That to me, the child should not be taken out of the house because the parent is in survival mode. But
Right.
CPS's role should be to provide resources and services. In New York, they do that. So
Mm-hmm.
if a parent is caught, let's say a neighbor calls and says, oh, they're leaving a young child, maybe 5 or 6 in the house at nighttime by themselves. We've heard the child crying, et cetera, et cetera. I would expect, and from what I know in those cases, many times CPS made a referral and provided some sort of childcare, actually, um, or a caretaker. Or nowadays, they're even providing money to family members
Mm-hmm.
to help become a better support system in these kind of cases. So in
Mm-hmm.
that case, no. Should a child be taken out of the house? No. Try to problem solve it. If
Mm-hmm.
there is an abusive sibling, and that abuse is becoming extreme, then that sibling would benefit from psychiatric services without taking the child out if they can do that to keep the family together. So
Mm-hmm.
when I say, you know, I'll be very honest with you, and from a New York standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it matters who's getting those services. And in this case, you will find many times children of color get lost in the system a whole lot quicker than children that are not
Mm-hmm.
minorities. Many of the services that they receive are much more
Less
pronounced.
adequate.
Right,
Less adequate.
right, right. Very
Mm-hmm.
much so too. And but New York is a dense place with a ton of kids in a ton of really rough situations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy when you're in a city or urban environment to get lost
Mm-hmm.
in this system in comparable to a more rural or suburban area.
Well,
You
that being
know?
said,
Hmm.
you know that where I live up here in Maine, right? We
Hmm.
don't get much more rural than that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We lead the country in abuse and neglect.
Okay.
Can you believe that? I mean, because you
Um.
the
Well,
argument
I
was
would.
so recently, like I think your population of New York City is more than the whole state of Maine, for God's sakes.
I
And
would probably. Yeah.
we're not only so I think it's 9.75 per a child per thousand that
Mhm.
gets abused or neglected. Maine
Mhm.
is double the national average, they say.
Mhm. Now,
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, why do you think that is, though? If it's a.
I think that that's some fudging of numbers. I think that they're trying to portray this state as something that it's not, to increase money that they take in through Title IV funds, keep people quiet from them taking children from homes. Maine has an increase of 4% adoption and taken into the homes, a steady 4% increase every year for the past 5 years. There's
Mhm.
nothing going down. It's all
Mhm.
going up. You know what I mean? And when they're dumping all this money into it, there should be downsize, because I know Title IV funding is based on reunification. It's not
Mhm.
based on this other nonsense. It's based on reunifying. And if these places aren't doing that, they're not giving the opportunities for reunification for these families, and that needs to be exposed.
So let me
You know,
ask you something, because
yeah.
we're, I've worked in more than one state, and the states that I have worked in, CPS actually doesn't take technically the child out of the home. They're the ones that make the referral, they
Hmm.
document, and it's the courts that decide it in the end. So it's they set this thing up, they go to court with the parent, with the child, and in the end it's the judge that
Or-
makes that determination.
right.
And CPS never that there's no social worker or CPS worker I've ever known who gets perks or gets patted on the back for taking children out. They're usually trained, and I'm talking about educationally, trained to do everything they humanly can to keep that child in the home. It has to be imminent danger before they'll bring that child
Oh,
out.
good one too.
Is that different in Maine in terms
Well,
of how the system works?
I will tell you this, that they offer the rubber stamp up here happens quite a bit, where it's not actually a judge's signature. It is the judge's signature. However, it's not their wet ink signature. It's because the caseworkers get carte blanche to go in there and just, oh, it's Thursday afternoon. We need to get this through. Thank you. They don't want to, because of the risk of putting blood on your hands, if you will. It seems like nobody wants to hold the hot potatoes. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
so they give these caseworkers the access to rubber stamp. I know mine was based on when my daughter was taken. My caseworker was in and out of there in a matter of seconds, and she's had to say next to nothing. As a matter of fact, my case had nothing to do with my daughter at all whatsoever, and they still took my daughter. And it just turned into a matter of her not liking me and not liking the situation. And I came out with a podcast. So that was that instance. But I have seen in action these people do this. And in Maine, we just had this argument last week on the show where I had to prove to a former co-host of ours that they do get incentives for, maybe not so like you're saying, like, oh, but it is that way. I think it's just shielded, but it is incentives for separate kids that they take into custody into service. So there are incentives that are given to these people for maintaining status quo, maintaining the workload. You know what I mean? To keep the products coming in and out, because they can't have a business if they don't have the kids. So. I mean, that's the way the cookie crumbles. And unfortunately, they have built a business that's built on, I mean, like it for better or worse terms, but it's child trafficking. I mean, that's just, there's no really way around it. I mean, they profit from taking children from our homes and putting them into someone else's home. Someone profits from it, right?
I don't know necessarily. I mean, I've seen cases where children, and it's more than once, were not taken out of the home and they're dead.
Yeah. So
They that has been a story that we have heard
yeah, too
one too
much.
many times. And
Too
I've
many.
not known of the thing that I've known for a lot of CPS workers is they're overworked, they don't get paid well, the salary is not a good salary. Now where they do make their money, this is the only thing I could back you on, is overtime. A lot of times they have to get up at 12 o'clock at night and go do a house call and that's major overtime for them. So they do, I mean, if there's an incentive, I guess that would be it. But even that, takes wear and tear on them. A lot of them are burned out. The turnover is ridiculous
Right.
in most states for CPS workers. That's not a job that is steady because first of all, it breaks their spirit half the time with everything that they're dealing with. And
Right.
I have never seen a CPS worker that was, happy about having to remove a child. It was a struggle for them. It's just that, again, when they were trying to weigh the safety and the well-being of the child, like, an example for me is, how do you take my sister out of the home and leave me there? That was it made no sense. It still makes no sense to this day, you know. And I've seen that in present day. We just had a case at one of the places that I work where there were twins, and one of them got taken and the other one was left. Made no sense. So now the other person that got stuck in that household tried to do some really crazy stuff. I just I don't I don't know. I mean, all jobs have, to a degree. I don't know of any job that doesn't have some sort of incentive in this culture, in this American culture. But it should not be where they're trying to destroy the family structure. It should be to try to help it. Maybe I mean, I was under the understanding if they've made a successful outcome of a family staying together and getting the resources they needed, that was more of the incentive for them, because that showed that they were doing their job effectively. Because the social worker's job is 75% referral.
Right.
That's in essence what they do,
Right.
right. And they're supposed to give families and adults and elderly the resources they need to be safe and okay. That's part of the role that they play. um that's why I was even asking you, why did you feel they had incentives in Maine? Because usually that's not, what motivates them.
Right. Well,
um
I mean, we see for a fact in the American Safe Family Act that Clinton put into play in 1997. We see there that they give incentives for meeting the threshold of 1 year adoption. We give you for the state $4,000 to $6,000, which eventually gets handed down to the caseworkers, through their different, maybe they have charts at work or however, but one way or the other, those itemized things get handed down to the caseworkers in some situations and some not. There are, like you've had whistleblowers like Carl Menendez and stuff tell you point
mhm,
blank that they do, like when you come in, they're like, look, if you can't have this many kids, then you're out of here. So, I mean, there might not just be a chart that you come in and it says stolen kids this week, today, like it might not be that way, but,
mhm,
you know, we're, we're talking about a system that they are doing it this way, and it's just not the way to look at it. And it's causing people like myself and others that are saying, hey, they're incentivized to look almost kooky, like people like these people
mhm,
that know what they're talking about. But in reality, there are these things that you can see, and you can go to, like I was telling the people on the show the other day, there's a thing called the open checkbook in each state that you can go to, and
mhm,
you can look. You know what that is? You can look at anybody that gets a check from the government in
mhm,
your state. They're on this checkbook, because it's like the accountability thing, the transparency thing. So you can see these caseworkers and everything. Their names are in there, their salaries and all this stuff. But yet there's a salary for gas and mileage or something every week, and it's
mhm,
$360 on the nose for every one of them. 360, 360, 360. And then some of them, there's certain real estate. I'm not a genius, but something tells me that something's fishy here, because they're not driving the same exact mileage and gas each week for $360. You know what I mean? And
mhm.
it's every week at the same time. So there are ways of seeing that and assuming, I guess, which is wrong. But then there's things like those news articles that I put forward that I had showed that I could pop up here for you, or I can email them to you, where they said in Maine, they are incentivizing these caseworkers to go after such and such people and such. For people of substance abuse and mental health and so on, they're getting bonuses for taking on those types of scenarios. So, I mean, they're not necessarily getting the bonus for taking them out, but they're definitely getting a bonus for keeping them in, you know?
Mhm.
So, and then you go across the state, there's that. But anyway, let's talk about your job as the occupational therapy.
Okay.
Well, wait, before you go there, let me see if I follow this. So
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
see if Gail follows this too. So what you're saying that if I went up to Maine and became a CPS worker, and I was a very aggressive CPS worker, and I was able to go into homes and take children out, I can make a pretty good sum of money.
Um, that's I'm sure is any job. I don't know. I mean, read
No,
the
I'm
article.
asking. I'm asking. Is that your point? If I'm aggressive in terms
My
of the
point
way I do
My
things,
point
so
is that every place there's incentives and bonuses and all kinds of things lurking around every corner.
So I'm saying that if I aggressively was able to go and find reasons, whether it's real or not real, whether it's true or not true, and able to take a child out of the home to put them in foster care or whatever, then I could be making a lot of money.
If that's
I
what
could,
their incentive packages show, and that's what they're talking about, then sure, I guess. But you got to read
well,
what they're saying. I don't know.
well,
I don't
that's
work
the,
there either.
see, Darren, that's what I'm trying to understand. Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
what,
Because from what I understand, they're having difficult time just getting workers to work because they don't
okay.
pay that much.
We
Correct.
already saw what the average is: $68,000 in the state of Maine. Remember?
They okay, 60. Okay, do you know what they make in New York, Gail? Do you have any idea? Although New York is a
Right
more
now,
expensive area to live, but
right. Well, they don't make 68. I can tell you that. From what I know,
okay.
they make in the 50s. They make 50 something thousand, but because most of them do a lot of overtime, they end up in the end making about 80. Because they were supposed to be limited to like 8 kids, and they end up having 20 or more on their caseload.
I know that's a
So,
question I've never asked. Is that
mhm.
what the typical number is of kids? I've never even asked that question, to be honest. How many? What is the like a caseworker's load, Gail, that you know of? I know,
I don't yeah, I can't give you because I don't want to state I know facts here about that because
right?
that's not my area. But I do know that the state gives them a limited amount of kids that they're supposed to see, but because they don't have enough caseworkers and they don't have enough because the pay is terrible and they're overworked and overtired, and it's a huge turnover here. Um, that the most of them get stuck with doing ridiculous overtime. So they do make more of a salary than what their base salary is because of the overtime. But a lot of them quit in spite of that because they're wiped out, they're burned out.
Right.
You can't have that kind of load of children and
Mm-mm.
function. So for them, it's a truly burnout job. Usually, a lot of them don't last more than 5 years.
Mm.
Maybe make it to 10, and
I'm
then they're
thinking
yeah.
that.
And
I
in
mean,
the city of New York, the I don't
mm,
know if Maine has this, but most people want to keep city jobs here because you retire with a really nice pension. So
right,
when a person leaves a job in New York because they're burning out, that means it's bad.
right.
Yeah, right. So
That's
that's why we're saying, what did you think was an incentive? Because here in New York, I know the incentive, as well as a couple other states that I've been in. The incentive was to keep families together, not what you're thinking about pulling them out.
mm,
The incentive was genuinely the more you keep them together, the more they get patted on the back and say, "Good job."
mm.
You're really doing your job well. Um,
I mean, um, I wish that I could say that here, but that is absolutely not the case. And the Office for Child and Family Services, their investigation now twice, 2 years in a row, state that the state of Maine reunification is the last thing that they tried to do, and so is it. They don't try to even keep the kids in homes; they go right for the TPR. I mean, it's crazy. Like these, so it's hard for me to get a grasp of what the rest of the country's like when you're dealing with this, like in my backyard of these people. So you automatically start to assume that every caseworker is just like these ones. And maybe that's not the case. But I'm trying to look here for like incentives why I would show you this. But while I'm looking for this scale, let's talk imminent danger. What is imminent danger?
Anything that would cause death or real harm to another
Right.
human being. Right.
But like, okay, time period. Is there a time frame? Is there a? I mean,
Well,
so
it
what I'm getting
depends.
at
Okay,
is,
so let's talk about imminent danger for a minute and
yes,
use
yes,
concrete
ma'am.
examples.
Yep.
Okay. You have a baby that's being neglected, an infant. The baby
Okay.
is not getting fed, um, for whatever the reason is, and now the baby has become so dehydrated and so ill that if the baby is not fed or given nutrition, so within a certain period of time, the baby will more than likely die.
Okay.
That's imminent danger.
I
Okay.
agree. Yep.
Sexual abuse, most definitely
Imminent. Yes.
is imminent
Absolutely.
danger.
Absolutely. Yep.
A parent that is on drugs and has lost their sense of reality and
Yep.
potentially beats a child to the
Yep.
point where that child could die. And I have I've had to deal with those kids as a therapist after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Parents that were on drugs and they couldn't take the crying, which children do, and they tried to shut them up in the most
Yeah.
sick, amazingly crazy way that you humanly can.
Yeah. That's
Right.
yeah.
And they regret it later, but at that moment, that was
Too late.
imminent. Right.
Right. So then
Um,
that's, if we could stop, can we stop there for 1 second and
mhm,
talk about, this is awesome talking to you, by the way. I have a big, not a soft spot,
mhm,
but I have for substance abuse things. I have a spot there because I feel like they get, uh, I feel like people that are trying hard and being in substance abuse get an unfair shake by CPS all the way around.
mhm,
Of course, it's because of what I've seen up here. Because there's statistics that they throw around like, you only know about 7% of the drug users that are out and open as the typical drug users that you see in this country.
mhm,
The protocol ones. That they're in a dumpster, they're eating chicken from McDonald's, and they're living in a tent in the woods and all of that. That's 7%. They came up with that estimate last year. But there's 93% of substance abusers that you'll never know, and they could be your doctors, your friends, the police department, all
mhm,
these people that you don't know that are on drugs, right? So you have that part first and foremost, and it's almost like if you get nailed with a substance abuse by CPS, they've put you to the cross and burnt you, and you have no chance of getting out of it. I've seen so many people that have gotten in there because they had a substance abuse situation. They've gone through counseling, and one of these is
mhm,
myself. I've gone through counseling, completed counseling,
mhm.
got a scribbled off thing, no parenting classes, no nothing, yada, yada, yada. Write down the list and they'll still say no.
And you
And
know
why do you
what?
think it
That
is?
that to me is a very poor. If that has happened, that CPS or those particular CPS workers were not doing their job effectively because their role, if a parent has substance abuse, is to put the parent or give the parent a certain amount of time in rehab to clean up and to get it together. Usually, they would put the child with hopefully a family member. There's an aunt, there's a cousin, there's someone who can oversee that child's care while the parent clears up. It's not supposed to be to take the child away from the parent. The point would be to help the parent get it together and without just not
Feedback.
good. It's a drug problem. That's a reality. So let's see what we can do now to help this parent to get
Mhm,
on their feet, to get it together, to get cleaned up so that they can now care for their child effectively. That
mhm.
should be the whole goal of child protective services, in that respect. Because not all drug addicts or people that have substance abuse issues are going to be abusive to their kids in the respect of hurting, maybe neglectful,
Mhm.
and there may be other issues going on. But that's where you have to weigh it. But there are parents out there that that have had substance abuse issues, depending on the drug, of course,
Mhm.
that really messes their head up, especially something like meth.
Mhm.
Meth can make people do some of the craziest things, and they don't even realize it.
Right.
So
Right.
in that case, that would be imminent danger. But if it's a parent that is not paying bills, putting that child in a risky situation because they're getting ready to get thrown out in the street, et cetera, et cetera. The point of CPS would be to apply, support that parent with resources to clean up, to get housing, et cetera, et cetera.
Where are you? Like, why are you not anybody that I've talked to, my case, this case, that, why are you not the caseworker? Because we have not seen any caseworker do any of the things that you're talking about that you think should be protocol or is protocol or whatever. Like, where are you, Gayle? And why are there not 100,000 more of you in this system? Or I hope that there is, but it's not seeming like this. And why? Why is it that you're coming to, like, you aren't giving me any answer that I wouldn't give or I don't want to hear? It's almost like you're coming out of my brain, like, oh, this, like I'm waiting for this moment for this relationship for us to glitch and be like, wait a minute, no. But it's not happening because you are stating exactly what is supposed to transpire and take place when CPS comes in and is involved with the family.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so where are all of the other people like you? That's my question now. I mean, I'm not far-fetched. Herbert, let's see if he got rid of his feedback here. Yeah, Carrie just said the same thing. She said the entire discussion is awesome, and she agrees, and she thinks you're incredible. I mean, when does anybody ever say, I mean, you're not a CPS caseworker, but you are not. Oh, so let's get back to that for a minute then.
Okay.
Let's get back to how you tied in your occupational therapy stuff, ties in CPS and so on that way.
Okay, so as an occupational therapist, when I work in any setting, so it isn't even just with children, but in any setting, if I see something that's not right, and all therapists are supposed to do this, just like nurses and doctors are supposed to, we're supposed to report it. So if I'm in the school system, for example, I would report it to the teacher. If I notice something's off about the child or the child looks like they've been harmed. And the reason I may notice it even more so than maybe a teacher is because I work with children with disabilities. Sometimes those children are autistic, so they don't have verbal skills. And I'm working with them with self-care, and I may see something and say, okay, they're not able to verbalize this, but every time I touch them on their arm or something, they squinch because it hurts them. And why is that, right?
Okay. Yep.
So I would first try to talk to the child if I can, and even if the child is nonverbal, the child can usually shake their head yes or no, if nothing else. If I do think that there is a real strong concern, then I report it to the teacher. If the teacher doesn't act on it, then I go to the principal. If the principal doesn't act on it, then I would directly go to the state or the city, depending on the environment. I've never had to go that far. Usually, if I've said something that I was concerned about, then the teacher most of the time addresses it because the teacher never wants it to fall back on him or her that they noticed something was wrong with the child and they didn't address it. I mean, we had one case where we had a little person that was getting molested horribly so. And, it had to get reported. And it wasn't the mom's fault, but the mom was not able to protect the child. So because sometimes the adults are being battered just as much as the kids.
Right. Yep.
Right. So they can't help if they're broken as well. So that's my role in terms of it's my responsibility if I see something to say something. And then from there I'm out of the loop of that.
Yep.
Because most of the time and again, and this is where I've had interactions with CPS workers, because if I report something, now I have to document. My documentation has to come in and I have to document what I saw, why I had a concern, etc. And then they'll interview me and discuss certain things with me, and while they're doing their investigation, because they have to now at this point follow through and investigate the home, investigate whatever the concern is, and see is there a real concern here,
Mhm.
because sometimes with children with special needs, they can be very prone to getting hurt, and it may not have anything to do with abuse. You have children that have special needs that will hit their head against the wall when they get upset about something because they can't put their emotions in perspective. So that's not abuse. The important thing there is to give them a helmet so they don't harm themselves. So caseworkers have to look at all of the whole picture, um, because children with special needs are different circumstance in terms of what sometimes people would look at and think is abuse, but it may not be. you know Even
Mhm.
a diagnosis, a certain type of diagnosis where kids have had fragile bones and they break very easily.
Mhm.
That's important for everybody to know, because a parent could get accused of hurting that child. They
Mhm.
didn't, because the diagnosis caused it to be fragile. So all of that is a concern when a CPS worker is going in to oversee and make sure that the child is safe. And in a case like that, for example, it would be a CPS roles as that worker to make sure that the child is setting, I mean, not the child, the parent is setting up the environment to keep that child safe so that
Mhm.
self harm cannot occur. Because remember, it's not a parent's role is to protect that child. It's supposed to be to protect that child first and foremost, always. So if your child has a particular diagnosis and you're not protecting that child from harming themselves, that's a concern, and
Yeah, of course.
a parent needs to get on point with that, because
Mhm.
that's a form of abuse.
Mhm.
Or if a child is bedridden and you're not feeding them and they can't feed themselves, that's a form of abuse as well.
Mhm.
So all of that has to be overseen. And if the parent is struggling, then again, the system it needs to come in and maybe get a caretaker that helps that parent for a couple of hours throughout the day.
Mhm.
But I have to admit, I this is where I give all parents a play of children with special needs. This is a lot. If you have a child with autism and that child runs away and sometimes self-inflict, uh, deal with that daily, really tough on them. So the
Mhm.
parents have the resources provided to help them with their coping mechanism. You know,
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
so
That's
that's
it.
why I say it's a balance there. But there's so many, and this is one of the reasons I'm defending somewhat caseworkers, because have been so many good ones, and I just wanted to emphasize that I've seen this so many good ones that really did give parents, I mean, a ton of resources, from
Mhm.
economic resources, money resources, referral systems, organizations that will help fund them. In the South, I see more churches getting involved. New York, has a lot of city resources, but in the South, a lot of times you're directed to a church that will help a parent, church members that maybe will watch the child while the parent cleans up if it's a drug issue, or the parent is having, psychologically dealing with profound depression.
Mhm.
And the community as a whole will try to assist while that parent gets past this difficult period.
Mhm.
uh, and many times caseworkers I've seen are those referral systems, impressively so, actually.
Mhm.
But and I'm not saying all of them are great, because like with any profession, you have good and you have not good, including mine.
Right.
I've seen amazing therapists
Mhm.
in the profession, and I've seen some that I'm like, why did you want to work with people? You act like you don't like people, right? But yeah, right, you don't get in a
Well,
helping profession and not like people.
right. I mean, I think a lot of that too has to do, like you seem like you're a genuine person.
Mhm.
And it seems like when the words come out of your mouth, I want to help you. I think that's a genuine thing that comes from you, regardless of who you are: black, white, brown, pink, fat, slim, gay, not, whatever. Like I feel like
Correct.
talking to you, like you genuinely have love in your heart for people. So it's easy for you to take this and run with it and take this profession because you're out there, you truly are out there trying to help. So I wanted to go back to this kind of here, what you talked about earlier.
Mhm.
Um, you talked about that the kids that need the help are not getting the help. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but what we call them, or we say about them, is we say that those are what they call damaged goods, right? Those are kids that actually had fetal alcohol syndrome, or they were getting the hell beat out of them by their parents or whatever. So on and so forth down the line. These are people with real problems, real things that the services need to be rendered for. And our opinions and what we see is CPS kind of turns a blind eye at this because it's hard to market, a broken child. It's hard to adopt out a broken child. Let's be real here. The people that are adopting want to adopt a perfect, potty trained, 3-4-year-old, blonde hair, blue eyes, good family upbringing, no baggage, if you will. Like, let's just get an innocent kid, add a mom and dad, and boom, we got a family right here. We're off and running. Like, that's what the reality is. That's what most of these people are wanting. But if you got a kid that survived fetal alcohol syndrome, they're in a wheelchair, they're on a breathalyzer for their whole life, they're getting all these terrible, terrible treatments to keep them hanging on to life every second of every day, but they're still struggling and they're trying. So you have to give them back, you have to give those kids back what they're fighting for. Absolutely. But they're not marketable to them. So they leave them behind. And that's the assumption of a lot of us that are fighting against child protective services. And what they do is because they are leaving these kids behind. They are leaving these trafficked kids behind. They're leaving all of these kids that need the help behind. They're not paying attention to them. They're coming after people like me, that I got caught up in a case, that had nothing to do with my daughter or nothing to do with anybody, really. Wrong place, wrong time, for sure. It wasn't my fault. Sure, I drove the truck there. Sure, I allowed the person to be there. But overall, those are my, so, that's my instance with my kid, which wasn't even with my kid. She was at home. But that was enough for them to come in and snatch my kid up, tell me that I'm a piece of shit father and imminent danger and the whole freaking 9 yards. Come down and throw the hammer at me. And in 18 months, I'm TPR'd. My wife, too, because she supported me. My wife wasn't even supposed to be able to have kids. My wife was mom of the century, let alone mom of the year. And because she supported me, CPS said, you're out of here. Like, that's not right. And that's what's happening to this country. That's what's happening all around. I know, like, you sit here and you tell us these things where I'm like, how can I even argue about this with this lady? There's no freaking way I can argue with this lady. She's so nice. She's talking about good things. I'm going to look like a kook if I try to argue this stuff with this lady, because what I'm visioning and seeing isn't there according to this lady. And in reality, I guess it's not, because you don't see the things that we're saying. So how, this is a huge question right here. Like, this is the $1 million question. How do we get you to see what we see? And how do we get us to see what you see? Because that's the problem. The line is the people, because I was one of those people. If you didn't have CPS in my life, if you told me, hey, CPS took my kid, oh, screw off, Frank. I don't want nothing to do with you. You must be terrible. That was my assumption. I trusted the government. I trusted that their choices were great. I trusted in all of that thing to the point that I could kick someone to the curb for no reason, just the fact that CPS went there because I believed in our system that much. I don't know. I've seen it not only just from my side, but multiple people's sides. But you don't get to see that until it's too late and you're in the system now. Now you see this stuff. So how do we get the people to pay attention to this that aren't in the system and think that they're invincible? Like, how do we do this?
I mean, that is truly a question that I would really have to think about. Because I mean, in essence, when you just break down what you're saying, and it's not as effective as it should be, and I would say that that is true to a greater or lesser degree, because it probably needs to have more resources, more money put into it, to make it more effective, more, emergency centers, for families if they're in need. so that they don't have to get separated, or if they do have to be temporary. Um, but it's definitely a very profound question that um, I wish I could answer right now. You know,
Right. I
I
wish you could
know
too.
the one thing I wish could happen for a lot of parents, and I say this more for the younger parents. It would be great if a lot of parents could get training in terms of even just basic coping mechanisms, because life is real,
Yeah.
and it's easy for anybody to get overwhelmed trying to make bills and trying to make sure everything is taken care of, and then to raise another human being.
Right.
um, and parenting, I mean, I almost wish it was mandated in some of the schools I work in, because I've seen some of the parents, and it's questionable. Some are
Right.
great, some are very questionable, and I sometimes think if they just had somebody to train them or teach them certain
Hmm.
things to help them.
Hmm.
Um,
Maybe time management, right? Like time management stuff, and absolutely, just there's just life. They just need, some people just need, maybe they just don't get it enough. Like common sense isn't quite there. You know what I mean? Like there's just little tweaks that people need in their life.
mhm,
But you take away their kids, you take away their heart and soul, you've
mhm,
lost those people too. It's not
mhm,
just the kid and that's a whole nother topic that we could spend hours on talking about, I'm sure, was the fact that the children are being victimized worse out of this than anybody. The victims are being worse victims. I can't even say that properly, but
mhm.
that's for another time and place. But what people don't realize is that the second you take your kids, the kids away from the families, it's over for these people. I mean, you have your fight and your drive, and you're
Mhm.
trying to go and go and go, but it's almost like you're trying to get to that finish line. But with the statistics show there's a 12% chance of reunification
Mhm.
once they get your kids. That's not a good odd. That's not even remotely close to good odds.
Mhm.
Um, but that's using their numbers, using simple math. That's the number that we get. What do you tell parents that are trying to reunify, and they know that that's the number that they face, and
I I
you
would say
know,
don't ever give up. If you really love your child, you just have to make sure that you don't ever stop, and you do what it takes. You know,
mhm, I agree.
yeah, and that's. I mean, there's a bunch of things people can do that helps. You get character references from your
Mhm,
family members or friends. Your job, the job is a biggie. If you're involved with a church, you get them involved. uh but you just don't give up. If that child means all that to you, you do whatever it takes, um without without causing more harm to the situation, you know um
mhm,
because the love of a parent and a child is the strongest love of all, no question.
mhm.
Yeah.
I agree
And
100%.
yeah, and if it's a drug issue, then you prove, look, I've cleaned up. I've done everything I'm supposed to do now. I'm
Mhm,
showing responsibility. I'm showing that I've corrected that. If it was a parent, again, like I said, who's working some ridiculous hours and is not there, and they would consider that neglect, then you get that support system in there, and either find a family member that can come and help out, and the city, at least New York, will pay for that. I don't know if Maine does that. And if Maine doesn't, then maybe you should be contacting. So let's get real about how the system works now. Maybe
mhm,
collectively parents in Maine should be contacting their congressperson and their senators, since you guys vote them in there, and tell
mhm.
them you need some changes made,
It's
because that's where you'll get progress made in terms of how the legality and how the system works and how you get your resources
mhm,
to help support families. and making this
I
thing
like that.
work. And power is in votes. And
Yep,
you
I agree.
parents get
That's
together
good.
collectively and say, look, we're voting for you, so we need you to make sure you're helping us to remain cohesive as parents and stop, since you have this high statistics of children being taken away, and the system's obviously not working there. You need this fix. We need this fix. This should be on the top of your list as senators and representatives.
Hmm.
Yes.
I
And
agree.
that,
100%.
yeah. And that would probably be the first thing you need to do out of everything, especially because
Hmm.
this is an election year.
Yes,
You've
we
got
found
you've
it.
got more power
Yep,
this year than you're going to have for a while.
yep. I pound that in all the time. I pound it, pound it,
Hmm.
pound it on the show. Like, if you guys don't realize how important this election is, I don't care who you're voting for, but find out what they're doing with CPS, what their view is. At least do that. Find
Hmm.
out, vote in that direction. Like
But it's
this.
your local politicians in
Exactly.
state
It's the state.
that are
It's
going to
here.
affect this. Right,
Yep.
right.
It's
Keep
here.
in,
Absolutely.
that's
Yep.
right. That's right.
So Herbert's been doing a lot on the preemptive game. I'll let him. I know that we're getting a little bit out of time here, but I know that Herbert has a lot to say about the preemptive game and
Yes.
everything. But Herbert, I'm gonna hand these questions to you now. Gail, thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank
surely.
you. I'm gonna be right here. I'm not going anywhere. But I know Herbert definitely has some questions for you that he wants to talk to you about. So I'm gonna let him grab the reins here.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, well, Gail, I just wanted to mention, can you hear me okay?
I can. I can hear you
Okay.
perfect.
This is the book I've been reading and studying. Can you see it?
No.
Let me try to make it a little better.
But do me a favor. Take a picture of it and send it to me.
Yeah, here I'll get on the
Okay,
picture here.
I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll take a picture and send it to you. And it's about how to avoid CPS, a quick guide.
Ah. Okay.
Inside that book, it
Mhm.
talks about a whole bunch of stuff that
Mhm.
people do on a daily basis and they never think about it. For example,
Mhm.
allowing an older sibling to watch the younger, brothers
Right.
and sisters.
Sure.
And that's an abuse right there for that older sibling
Right. Right.
because it's mental stress on that child to watch other children.
Correct. And they usually don't have the parenting skills to do the right thing anyways.
Of
So.
course they don't. So that is a target right there for a CPS if they're aware of it. You see,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know, having your children out in the back in the pool and they're not being supervised.
Right. Right.
Drownings come out of that.
Right.
There's just a slew of things that people don't think about. That's normal. Having somebody in the house who may be a person that shouldn't be around children.
Right.
Okay, that makes it a target for CPS. But what I want to know from you is, can you can you comment on parents that are negligent in what they're doing, and then when their child are taken away, they get upset? Do you run into cases like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would probably say out of all the cases, that's the one that has the highest percentage that I have run into.
Can you
Um,
give can you give us an example of a case?
well, one of them was the one where I was telling you that the parent was working in the evening at nighttime, leaving two small kids at home by themselves. So the parent felt she didn't have a choice. She needed the job. This was the job she had. So she was leaving them there, and she would put them to bed to go to sleep. But then one night, probably the child had a bad dream or something, woke up screaming, was crying hysterically, 3 o'clock in the morning. The parent wasn't there. So the neighbors end up calling, and CPS comes in and takes the children away from this particular parent, right? So the parent felt that this was unjustly done because she felt she should have that she didn't have a choice because this was the only job she could get, and she needed to pay her bills and feed her children. um so this parent was very upset, and I believe the kids were taken away, if I remember correctly, for like 18 months before she was able to get them back. She had to show before she could get those children back that she had someone in that household at nighttime if she was going to continue with that particular job and not, leave them. Because again, the state said, or the city rather, said that that was a form of neglect. And they were right. It is. Because a fire could happen while you're out, and those kids are there by themselves. They don't know what to do if a fire occurs. And it has happened here in the city where fires have occurred and parents weren't home. Sometimes they were out partying. In this particular case, this parent wasn't partying, this parent was working, but um, this was one of those cases where she should have tried at least, because she really hadn't, to see if she could get some sort of cousin or somebody, a friend reaching out to somebody to say, can you watch them while I work at night? You could stay here, even maybe a roommate or someone to help out. Now, you do have those parents that want to party and they leave their kids and they neglect them so that they could do their things, so they could get out. Especially, I find more of your younger girls that have had kids at like 17, 18, 19. They're still young, they still want to have a good time, and these kids are kind of in their mind burdening them. Um, and that's, you have a child, you got to act responsibly. There's no give or take with that. Once you've had a child, and that's one of the reasons, interestingly enough, with what's going on in our country right now about birth control and stuff, because now you're increasing that for some people that may not be ready and having children and getting more into this realm of neglect, because it's also a lack of maturity. So, and CPS, if they do find out you're going out all the time and leaving kids 5 years old to cook their own food or to fend for themselves, it's going to be an issue. Um, Now, what I would recommend for any parent, and I guess parents don't always realize this, and I don't know if this is a state by state thing, but many times if parents are having difficulty, they can reach out to family agencies to request assistance. What I will say in fairness, though, is that some of these centers are overwhelmed and are packed, and sometimes they're not always able to help everybody. So it's a big challenge, Herb. It really is
Yeah,
when I see what's
I
going on.
hear. I
You know.
hear. Now, what about cases with
Mhm.
parents who are doing drugs, but they're so used to doing drugs they don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then when CPS finds this out, have you run into cases like that?
Yes. Yes. And now, okay, so in New York, that's a little bit different. Here in New York, what they usually will do, um, they will tell the parent that they can get the child back within a certain amount of time. They usually try to house that parent, I mean that child, with
Well, okay, you jumped the gun.
uh,
How did it start? Give me an example. Give me a scenario of how it started. You already took the kid away
oh,
before the kid
okay,
was taken
okay.
away.
So what
Start.
usually happens is that uh let's see, the child may have come to school smelling like um like weed maybe, or the child actually has drugs on them. Um and it gets
So the child could come to school and their clothes is reeking of weed.
oh, absolutely. I've smelled that firsthand.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
yes, I
And
really.
and, and the child at home wasn't smoking no marijuana,
Maybe,
but
maybe
the
not. But the
the
point is,
parents the
uh
parents were, and so the child has it on their clothes.
correct.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
So they come to school and they reek of it. I mean, it's not
yes.
even just a faint smell. They really reek of it. It's in their hair, their clothes. Everything about them smells like weed. And this is even before weed became legal. Um, and so it gets reported. Now, once it gets reported, a house visit has to come into play. Usually, they will not take the child away, not for weed. Usually, they'll just tell the parent that you got to clean it up stop it, and you have to give us proof. And usually that proof comes by going to some sort of rehab center. Now, if it's a more heavy duty drug and the parent is losing it, then that's different because then that's
Okay. Now, when you say they check, does CPS come and do a welfare check or check on a home? Do they do
yeah,
a
they check.
drive-by, a stop-by?
Well, they check a few things because okay, so the latest example I had was actually before this last year was out. There was some kids that were coming to school and they definitely smelled like weed every day, right? The CPS workers did go into the household to do a wellness check, but they didn't do it so much because the kids were smelling like weed. They were doing it because, unfortunately, a lot of parents who do a lot of drugs, whatever the drug of choice is, their kids don't come to school enough. And it becomes reportable if the kid doesn't come to school. Because if a parent is high, they're not worried most of the time about their kid getting to school, or their kid gets to school late every day. And that also is a red flag. So if that's going on, then CPS goes into the household to find out, why isn't your kid going to school? Or why is your kid showing up at school late every day and missing the first 2 or 3 or 4 subjects? And the parent has to be able to justify that, and usually they can't. So then again, CPS will usually say to them, okay, your child has to get to school and start being in school on time, or we are taking your child out of this household. And you also have to go to rehab at the same time, especially if the parents are not working. But even if they are working, they have to find, and sometimes the parents have to find the program on their own. They'll get recommendations, but the parent has to show that they're making that effort, as well as making sure that kid gets to school, because it's reportable. I think if the child misses more than 2 to 3 days per week, over a month or 2 month period of time, then it gets automatically reported. Like, it's not because somebody's reporting the parent, that gets reported to the city, and the city has to act on it.
Okay, when the city acts on it, they don't send a truant officer out. They send CPS out.
Correct. They do, or
Oh,
a social worker to the house to check and see why the child is not going to school. And then
oh.
right, right.
So the truant officer is not like back in the day. They call it the truant officer. They're not using that no more. They're using CPS.
Well, yeah, and part of the reason I think that they're doing that is because a lot of your officers are not equipped to deal with psychosocial issues. So because of that, too many things I think back in the day were escalating, and they needed people that are trained to go into the household and see,
Okay.
why isn't this kid going to school? What's going on? Why? Right.
So that's a new thing I didn't even know about. So that introduces CPS into the home because of the absence, so many absences of the
Correct.
child. So the CPS is coming knocking at the house.
Correct. To find out why this kid is not going to school. We need to find out
Gotcha.
now what's going on. Right. And if they find out it's because the parent has a drug issue, or if they find out the parent is got mental illness, or if they find out the parent's being neglectful. We've had kids where parent went on vacation, and it was just reported in New York. This happened, I think, about 6 months ago. Parent went on vacation and left the kid. And who does that? But this was,
Really?
oh yeah. Then and the kid was no more than, I think, 7 years old. And the
Oh
parent went
no.
on a 2 week vacation and
And
left the kid in the house by
left the
themselves.
kids home to go to school every day and cook their own food.
Correct. And this wasn't kids. This was a kid, one kid.
Oh, one
Right.
kid. Oh, so the kid had the key to get to the house, lock the door, go to school, come back, open the door, whatever, all by themselves. Hello? Hello?
Did we lose Gayle? Oh no.
Can you see?
I don't. She's gone. Oh, that was good stuff, Herbert. That's a great interview. That was a good find, man. I'm not gonna see what happens here, but wow, what a, I mean, that's more than I've learned all year. What I've just learned from that lady.
Well, what I just learned from her too is that the truant officers don't exist anymore. I thought truant officers were around, and now I'm learning no. Your kid's not going to school. CPS is coming to your door.
Well, I know that we're way over we're way over, but what do you think the chances are that we can get Gayle back? I'm sure pretty good, huh?
I can find out. I can ask her.
I mean, it would be pretty cool to have her maybe come in once a week or something. Oh, here we go. I think we got her back. All right, good. She's back. Let me pull her in here. Whew.
I
All right.
lost the call somehow.
All
Yeah.
right.
It's okay. You're back with us now.
Yes.
So Darren was just asking, what are the chances of you coming back on again, maybe next week, or even if possible, one day a week? It could be Gayle Day. We could call it the Gayle Day.
Sure. I think I can manage that.
What's a good day for you?
Actually, the end of the week is better for me. I have to, well, you already know, Herbie, I got to grade papers and stuff. So, during the week, it's more difficult for me, because I teach, but I can do it toward the end of the week. That leaves me more
So like
available.
today, like a Friday.
Yes, a Friday would be fine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you could tell us that
Mm-hmm.
could help people who are listening,
Mm-hmm.
things they can do to avoid being a victim of CPS?
I would say primarily if you're struggling, try to reach out for resources. I know me as a parent personally, it's sometimes been hard for me to reach out because I didn't want to feel like I owed people or obligations. For me, that was more of my issue, but we all have different issues. But you know what? We all need help sometimes. We really do. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you don't have family that can help you, you see about friends, and if you don't have that, start looking at resources within your state to see, if you can find a group of people that are positive and not trying, because you also got to be aware when you're reaching out for help who you're reaching out to help too as well. But there's usually resources, even if it's not your necessary city that gives you resources. There's usually organizations that will help, and sometimes I think, we don't think that they're out there, but many times they are, even outside of the system itself. Um, and then, there's nothing wrong if you're having trouble with your coping mechanisms of reaching out and seeing a therapist or seeing someone you could talk to before one thing filters into another for parents. Because I remember one of the greatest feelings I had as a child was, why didn't my mother get help? I knew my mother had mental illness and it hurt me. Why didn't she get help? Why was she hurting us? Now, looking back at it years later, I realized people were afraid to get help back then. They thought you would be labeled as being crazy. And it has nothing to do with being crazy. It just has to do with the fact that we all sometimes are struggling with our coping mechanisms. And that's a normal human thing. Life gets us sometimes. So if it's getting to that point and you're having trouble coping in terms of managing, how do I keep my child, well fed and protected, work, and try to deal with my own personal demons, whatever they're reaching out to get. Since you can find some services that are next to zero, in terms of finances, if not, zero, to help you.
Okay.
All right. Well, Herbert, what do you think? You think this is a good point to wrap us up here?
Yeah. I'll start off by ending. Gayle, as I'm talking, you can think of what you like to say. And I like to end by saying, parents, if you are in the system And you're involved with the courts and your friends
resources,
and
because
everything.
I've learned a lot from discussing with people, and they'll say, "Oh, you could get help with getting a bill down by calling so and so," something that I would have never thought to do, because that's their strength or their body of knowledge. Just like I'm good at occupational therapy because that's what I do. There are people that
Okay.
are good at other
Well,
things, and they can be a great resource in terms of.
Yep.
I have a friend; she's wonderful at research. So if I need something researched and I don't have the time, I'll give her a call in a minute. She loves that stuff,
Mhm.
okay.
you know.
Okay. Well,
Um,
we have a lot of
so
parents listening.
I would think that would be kind of like my biggest recommendation right now. Don't be afraid to reach out for help because we all need it sometimes.
Okay. Okay.
And
Now we have a
and
lot.
if you don't know how to
Okay.
reach out for help,
Yeah.
reach out to a couple people that may be their stronger point, and they may be able to
Yep.
say, "Oh yeah, I'll help you with that. Let's figure that out together."
Mm.
Okay,
Sometimes
Gail.
it's
Hey,
even somebody
Gail.
you don't know that well, but you just
Right.
established a conversation with, and next thing you're sitting there saying, "Wow, thank you." You
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
know,
Gail. Hey,
Just like
Gail.
is
this.
that
Can you hear
helpful
us?
at all?
That's
Yes.
one.
Yes. Gail,
I
can you hear
can't hear
me?
you, Herbie.
Can you hear me? What I'm
Can you still
asking
hear
you
me?
is, I can
Yeah, we
hear
can.
you. Yes. What I'm saying to you
I don't
is
know what
that
happened.
look, I don't know what happened. Can you hear me?
I'm gonna go out and come back in because I can't hear anything.
Okay, go out, come back in. When she comes back, I want to ask her what recommendations does she have for people who are in the system,
That's what she
which the
just said.
majority of your
Yeah,
your viewers are in the system.
right. And she
What?
just said that. Don't be afraid to go out and use your resources. Find people that have the
Well, I want
services.
to know. No, I want to know specific ideas. The
You know,
word resources is very broad.
well,
It
it's
can mean a lot,
yeah.
but I
Well,
want to
there's
know
there's 10,000
specific.
different there's 10,000 different combinations of things that people need help with. I
There
mean,
is, but
there's
the
all
thing is, when you're in the court system, for example, should you try to fight this on your own by yourself? Should you get an advocate to help you? Should you get an attorney? If you can't
Yeah,
afford an attorney,
well, we know that
okay,
that's the
Gail, you back?
don't
yeah,
fight
I'm
it by
back.
yourself.
Okay, what I wanted to ask you is,
Hmm.
we have a lot of viewers that are in the system. Their children
Hmm.
have been taken away,
Hmm.
okay, and they're fighting in the court system. Do you have any ideas for them on what
Well,
they
that's
could
what
do?
yeah. I'm sorry,
You
I didn't
talked
mean to
about
interrupt.
reaching out for help, but can you give us examples of how they can
Correct.
reach out
That's what
to
Right.
do to get the kids back?
Well, that's where I was speaking about earlier, character references. If you can
mm-hmm.
get character references from, if you're active in a church or if you're active
Mm-hmm.
in a volunteer
Mm-hmm.
community,
Even the guy from the
character.
store that sees you every day, right?
That's
Even
correct.
anybody.
That's correct.
Yep.
Anything, a job, a community effort, family, family saying, wow, he or she has been working so hard to get their act together. They're doing A, B, C, and D now. We will vouch for them, etc. So that's number one, I think you can do to work on getting your child back. Also, proof. If you weren't working, you show now you've got a job and that you've been consistent with it. If you were on drugs, you went to rehab, you're cleaned up, and you've got proof of it now. They're going to take a drug test anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you weren't working and they didn't feel you really had justification for not working, even if it's the most menial job, at least until you can get on your feet and do better, you take that job and show I'm making effort. If it was a neglect thing, show that you've talked to. I mean, one of the big things with court, I think, for a lot of parents, if they can see some sort of therapist and the therapist vouches for them, that's usually pretty major in the court system. That a therapist writes a letter saying, look, this person has come a long way and they are demonstrating A, B, C, and D. The courts will usually look at that and say, okay, this shows that they really are making an effort because they even went to a therapist, and to say, I want to make sure I'm on point as a parent, you know. So those are some of the recommendations that I think can help any parent get a child back. And it validates them, because see, the courts don't care about your emotions. They don't care that you love your child. They really don't. They want proof. For court systems, they claim that they care about, love, but they hear I love you, love you, love you all the time, and they don't know if it's real or if it's not. But for them, it's proof of that love, and that proof is, you know, you went to a therapist to work out whatever demons you had. You got a job, or you went to rehab to clean up from your drug thing, and now the rehab center gave you this wonderful letter stating that you've been clean for such and such amount of time, and that you're doing great. You've shown consistency in participating and actively being involved in your rehab.
Mhm.
Now, Gail, I want to ask you, you may or may not know, but do you know of any actual working social workers that may be interested, and it could be like you, where your face is not shown, to come on the show and talk to us? Hello? Earth to Gail. Earth to Gail.
But you can't hear me.
Oh, I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I was asking you, do you know of any social workers actual working now that we can have on the show? They
So
don't have to show their face.
I got you. Interestingly enough, I do know one that I had actually was going to reach out to, and I text him, but he's getting married, and he said right now he's dealing with all of that, so it wasn't good timing. But I will call him back and ask him, does he know another person that may be interested in doing that? And then there was a woman I work with at the school, and I don't know if I have her. I may not be able to get in contact with her until September when I start back at the school, but I can also try to reach out to her as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we have questions to ask the actual workers.
Yeah.
Why do
I
they
agree.
do what they do? For example, why do they bring the police with them when they go to the house? Why do they come up saying they have a warrant or whatever to take the child, and they really don't? We have a lot of questions like that. We like to ask them.
I do know that sometimes caseworkers will bring the police with them because their life can be in danger. Parents get mad. And, when you're in the heat of passion and somebody's telling you they're getting ready to take your child, or they're even questioning your parenting skills, things get heated and caseworkers have gotten hurt. So that may be part of the reason for that. But, I'd rather a caseworker tell you the whole picture, because there may be much more to it than that. So,
yeah. And so
yeah.
we would have a lot of questions for a case worker.
Mhm.
Last but least,
Mhm.
are all case workers MSWs? What do you call it? Master's degree in social work.
Right. I now that I can't answer. I don't know, but I can
Okay,
ask.
so
I can find out
to be a
sometime.
case worker, can you just have an associate degree or a bachelor's degree or no degree?
I think, well, I don't know if you can have an associate's for a caseworker. I think it has to be a bachelor's, but I'd have to double check that.
So
I
a
know in
person can
order
have
to,
a bachelor's degree in English, and it could apply to be a caseworker.
right, and that I don't know about. I know in order to
Okay.
provide therapy, to become a therapist or to counsel people, you have to have a master's for that. That much I do know.
Okay.
Right, but the other part I don't. So,
Yeah. I want to know what kind of degree does the caseworker, and by the way, the caseworker that goes to the house, is that the low level of CPS? The lowest paying job?
got you. Yeah, I don't know.
It's No,
Yeah,
we're talking about pay scales
yeah.
before. And I just want to know, is the low pay scale the caseworker that goes to the house versus the administrators that's
Mhm.
over the caseworkers?
Mhm. Yeah, I believe the caseworkers are one of your lowest paying jobs in that arena, but again, I don't want to give you misinformation. So
Okay, no problem.
yeah.
Well, I look forward to you reaching out to some social workers that will be willing to come on the show to speak
Mhm.
to us so we can ask them some questions.
Yes.
And you could be on too. You could be on and introduce them,
Hmm.
and they could be on. Again, they don't have to show their face,
Yes.
okay? Just like you're
Yeah.
not showing your face.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I
it's
was, it's late and I was getting ready for bed. That's the
no,
only
no,
reason.
it's
But
no, it's okay. It's
yeah.
okay. You don't have to. That's what I'm trying to say.
Uh-huh.
But it's okay. Comfortable coming on and talking. They don't
Hmm.
want to use their real name. That's all.
Okay. I'll tell them that as well.
Yeah, let them
Yeah.
know. If the
Yeah.
guy's name is Robert, he wants to.
Herb, I can't hear you again. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah,
No.
we can hear you.
Okay.
Uh, we can hear
And
you.
hopefully, and do please take my suggestion. And I'm sending this out to all the parents. Write those local officials where you live and tell them you do need more resources and assistance, and that they need to funnel some money in that area because it is important. This is where children are the most important, and that's something that's a start there. If you can get more resources to help parents out to begin with, you know so instead of just
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right, Darren.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Okay.